likelihood that you'll success by doing the right thing to attend today. Why am I saying that? Because so many people think risk management is about bad things management. Nope. Risk management is about managing uncertainty of outcome. That's it. So we can apply risk management to the uncertainty of success, doing things to make success more likely. We can also apply risk management to identify those things that impede us from achieving success. And we can do things to manage that as well, making it less likely that the things that would hold us back actually happen. So we've got management of downside risk, bad things that we don't want. We also have increase of certainty of positive outcome, which is managing good side risk with other measures. So the ultimate objective of this then is in creating value. Pause for effect just a moment, because I want it to sink in. That means that really good governance is about good risk management. You can't have one without the other. So really, risk management is really the core of good governance. That's why oftentimes we hear governance, risk, and compliance. Compliance is actually a type of risk management. We want to protect our ability to comply with regulatory requirements, to comply with contractual requirements we have with our customers and our vendors and our investors, for example. And since compliance touches almost everything in the organization, as does risk management touching everything in the organization, we tend to call it governance, risk, and compliance. So, again, this is really the setup for the conversation to come. As far as, well, Alan, what's on the exam? Nothing yet. I'm just setting the tone. How will I know what's on the exam? I'm going to have a tip for you. I'm going to have a special code that you'll be able to identify from the presentation, even after we leave each other and you go to study from your PDF, how you'll be able to identify out of all of this content, what do you particularly need to memorize for the test? I'll show you when we get there. So again, what you need to know then, top-down risk management. This is important for you to understand for this exam because ISACA is now concerned that you understand how important it is for management to want good risk management in order for risk management to actually be practiced elsewhere in the organization. If the board and the executive management never asked for it, it'd be kind of crazy if the people in the rest of the organization woke up one morning and said, let's do something we've never been asked to do. Yeah, that sounds good. No. In order to make sure, increase the certainty that good risk management happens throughout the organization, it needs to start at the top. It needs to be their idea that, yeah, we're going to have this in our organization. So again, the risk oversight process typically begins with the board of an organization. Their responsibility, their role in an organization is to require that the organization, well, get the right things done, and then on occasion, go back and review what they've required to make sure that the right things got done per their previous requirement. So that's an assurance function. So if the intent is for the organization, if they say, we want this organization to actually be lawful, we want it to comply with laws and regulations. Great, express that as a policy requirement, put it down to your executive management. Now they know, hey, from here on out, we have to make sure that what we do isn't just profitable, but it's also legal. What happens if the board forgets to require that it's legal and they only require that it's profitable? That might result in a different way of business, huh? So again, intent for what the organization wants, its oversight begins at the board level. And the board then, that's a different looking bullet right there. That's kind of, I don't know what you would call that. What's the name of that symbol? I'm not sure, but it looks kind of like a diamond. Right prior to the board has the task of overseeing management's implementation of strategic and operational management. Isn't that redundant with what I've already said? Yes, it is. But this is redundant in ISACA language. Wink, wink, nod, nod. Paw twice if you're understanding me. Again, like I said, I tend to reinforce concepts with the way that ISACA will put it. Oh, put it where? Please, if you don't know what I'm talking about, you shouldn't be here. When I put that little bullet in front of it, that's going to be something that in the PDF you'll probably want to really focus on to rote memorize for your exam. Another little tip, when you take our practice questions, oftentimes these little bullets will be the answer to our practice questions. It only makes sense that we would use our practice questions to reinforce those points you really need to memorize for your test. So, enough said about that. Hopefully you were here to hear that. People that come in later, well, they missed what you just learned. So, corporate management then is responsible for developing and executing an enterprise's strategic and routine operational risk program in line with what? The strategy that was set by the board and that is subject to their oversight. Pardon me. Again, exam-y content to memorize. That means the commitment and support of senior management for information security investment can be accomplished by doing what? Providing a business case that ties security risk to enterprise business objectives. See what I mean? You're not tying security risk management to IT objectives. They might have that answer in there. And that would be the wrong answer, because the better answer, and they always say, choose the best answer, the better answer would be, if offered, the organization's enterprise organizational business objectives, because those should drive IT objectives. It's that kind of test. So again, top-down risk management is typically what we see that we desire to have in organizations today. So governance, the board of directors is accountable for the overall enterprise strategy for risk governance. So if you're asked, which of the following choices would best be accountable for the overall enterprise strategy for risk governance, you would be attracted to the answer that said the board of directors, for example. So again, not really new content here. I'm just throwing it out at you as things to memorize. NM comments, the test is a pain in the butt. I've taken 3 times, missed it by 5 points or less. The questions seem flexible. NM, you are right, sir or ma'am, I'm not sure which. And that's why these little tips, do you find them to perhaps be valuable? You, having tried the exam 3 times, know that oftentimes you look at the question and all the answers look good. If only somebody gave you a little bit of a nudge to know which one ISACA liked the best, yeah? And that's what I'm doing. You understand the value of what I'm trying to do. Hey, Nick, you understand the value of what I'm trying to do. Others that haven't taken the exam and perhaps struggle with it, failed with it yet, they haven't encountered that yet. So hopefully you'll be able to kind of give them some insight that how important this is. Sorry about that. Thought I had it muted. Likewise, what should be the primary driver of IT and information security governance strategy? Nick, do you remember those questions where they would ask, out of the following drivers, which is the primary driver? And you're going, well, they're all good drivers. What do you mean primary? Do you mean most important? And you might answer which one you think makes the most impact. Only problem is they may have meant sequentially. Which one is it that you have to look at first before you look at the others? Remember when I said that business strategy, business goals and objectives drive all the other strategies and goals and objectives throughout the organization? Therefore, business strategy is the primary driver of IT and information security governance strategy. This is an example, yeah? Yes, it is pretty similar with CISSP. I haven't done the PMI. I accomplished the CISSP long ago. And you mentioned that it's about the vendor's writing style. 2 things I would comment on your comment there, because that's important. Firstly, it's a little bit different from CISSP in that CISSP doesn't typically ask you which of the following is the best answer. They're really kind of drilling at what the right answer is, and it's one of those. In other words, there's no argument about which good answer is the best answer. That's the first thing that is different about CISSP. The second thing that's different about CISSP is that there actually is a vendor's writing style. Well, doesn't ISACA have a vendor's writing style? Kind of and kind of not. And I'll tell you why. Go onto ISACA's website, and if you dig deeply enough, if you do a search on submit exam item, for example, on their site, you'll find that they actually have directions for you as a member of the public to submit an exam question candidate. What? ISACA crowdsources their questions. So that means they don't really have people, professional on staff that I know of that are creating these things, and therefore that they're all going to have a consistent approach or method or even follow academic requirements for questions. They're soliciting them from the people at large. And a lot of times these people at large are creating questions like you may remember back in first or second grade in elementary school and primary school, where you were told to ask the class a question and you would try to create a question that only you and God could know the answer to because it was so tricky. You get that on ISACA's exam as well, because you've got people that are not professional exam makers submitting exam questions that could end up on your test. That makes this thing really dicey, because that means that the professionalism of how the questions are actually written can sometimes be questionable, we'll say, in my subjective, non-factual opinion. So, that's what makes this exam really difficult. It's not really the content. It's not that technically arduous. It's just the way that it's done. So let's go ahead and continue on. Alignment of security function to strategy, goals, mission, and objectives. Again, we've already talked about this, an examee question. Aligning the information security function to organizational strategy, goals, mission, and objectives requires what? A top-down approach. The information security function typically is really a specialized risk management function. That means that information security is actually a natural element of or subset of overall enterprise risk management. Strategic planning, it goes along with governance, doesn't it? Figuring out where we want to end up before we figure out on how to get there. So achieving alignment to corporate strategy means that organizational strategy informs and drives IT strategy as well as information security strategy. Again, that means a risk management strategic plan should define and determine current state and desired future state in order to establish a path for improvement and progress. IT governance and strategy, again, I don't necessarily now need to read all of these points to you because they tend to reinforce the concepts I've already told you. Meaning that, well, with over 200 slides to cover in 4 hours, there's more content there than I can really present well. Meaning when we get to pieces like this, I'll skip forward kind of lightly. Don't think that it's because they're not important. It's just that these are things that you just need to memorize for the test because they support the concepts I've already taught you. So, again, complexity of security governance models, highly dependent upon the complexity of organizational structure, since organizational structure drives security governance models. And likewise, an internal control system or framework is what we use to help ensure IT is successful in delivering against what? Business requirements. It's always about the organization's business requirements. That is a theme for ISACA. So now we have, again, just to keep your attention, keep you on your toes, I've got some practice questions that we can go and do together. It also kind of mixes up the flow of this thing, keeps it interesting. You don't answer in the actual group chat, attendee chat section. What you'll want to do is you have the ability to actually choose and select there in the interface which of these answers you like. And so then we're going to be able to collect those answers and then go forward and look at how many of us got the answer right. And I'll discuss, looking at the question, why some of us chose wrong answers and how they got tricked. So as we look at this, aligning the information security function to organizational strategy, goals, and mission and objectives requires what? A bottom-up approach with solid leadership, mandate, and commitment. A collaborative cross-functional approach with business process owner risk assessments and management. A top-down approach with solid leadership, mandated commitment, or a risk-assessed approach driven by IT strategy. Wow, all of that looks really nice. Which one is the best answer according to the theme and the concepts that I've been teaching you over the past few slides? So far, we have about 29% of the attendees have submitted their answer. So we'll give this just a moment and let you try to get your best recollection of what you heard. Okay, we're about ready to move forward. So if you've got an answer you want to throw at it, go ahead and throw your dart. Nobody can chase you and find you. So as we go forward, we say aligning the information security function to organizational strategy, goals, and missions and objectives requires what? Wow, over 90%, almost 91% chose a top-down approach with solid leadership, mandate, and commitment. That indeed is the correct answer. Now, we had a few people that chose a collaborative cross-functional approach, and that is actually true. But again, what does ISACA like? Nick, it's ISACA's exam, isn't it? So we answer the ISACA way. Again, a risk-assessed approach driven by IT strategy. Actually, that one, again, you're saying that IT strategy drives the security strategy when really it was the organizational strategy, goals, and objectives that drove both. So again, remember the hierarchy. Remember how they relate together. And again, if you say, oh, how will I remember it for the exam? Rote memorization is the best friend you have. You can help that. Usually practice exams are really good for me to really cement that in, but you might be able to do it just from your notes in the PDF. So good job, everybody. Good jump at that. RWS, is reading and learning ISACA publications critical to success? I found that to be true with another ISACA exam. Again, yes and no. The authors differ from one manual to the next. And my experience is, one time ISACA actually approached me to contribute to a CISM review manual. And again, I'm not staffed by ISACA, and they weren't looking, I wasn't being interviewed for it. They approached me. And when I asked if I would get any special access to the actual content of the exam to give me a better focus for what I needed to write about, they would not give me that access. They said, well, our exam objectives are posted for you just like they are for everybody else, which would leave me guessing at the exam, just like everybody else. So I say, make your own decisions. Sometimes the review manual works very well for people. Other people prepare from the review manual and go to the exam and wonder what they prepared from and what it has to do with that exam. It's the experiences vary, I've seen. So I would not, however, say that it's critical to your success, because again, basically you're looking at a work that was prepared by people like me that were looking at the same exam objectives you are, to be honest. So going on into organizational structure, roles, and responsibilities. What do we have here? Leadership. Well, leadership is kind of important for organizational strategy that we talked about in governance, isn't it? If you don't have effective leadership, then it's hard to have effective governance. So the introduction of management of security risk, ensuring that its ongoing effectiveness requires strong, sustained commitment. You're very welcome, RW. By the management of the organization, as well as strategic and rigorous planning to achieve commitment at all levels. That is what we're trying to accomplish. Again, we need that strong and sustained commitment by management. Otherwise, it won't be actually paid attention to in the organization. And again, RW, again, I would say you understand in this public forum, I need to be very, very sensitive to my opinions. All I'm saying is that some people find review manuals difficult to study from, while others may find them to be very, very strong. Some people read the review manuals and wonder, and they end up being more confused than they are enlightened. But that's only some people. So it's up to you. Moving along, effective risk management then in an examine way requires the participation, support, and acceptance of whom? All applicable members of the enterprise, beginning with executives, because we have to get the buy-in and commitment from leadership for anybody else in the organization to care. That's where you start. That is in fact true. Typically, when I've got an organization that wants to establish enterprise risk management, and they want me to start training middle managers about it, and I say that's a bad place to start. The best place to start with developing in real life a good, solid enterprise risk management program with a good risk committee. Don't start with the people that are going to be on the risk committee. Start with the people who can require having a risk committee, and that would be the board and the C-suite executives. So, again, you're seeing over and over again the kind of redundancy here that the board of directors of an enterprise, they are the ones that also have ultimate accountability for risk. Why? Because in the end of the day, external stakeholders expect that the board is working on their behalf to ensure the organization is run properly. And if the organization does not fulfill stakeholder expectations, external stakeholders don't crawl into the organization to find people to blame. They say, hey, board, you were supposed to be on top of this, and you're not. So ultimate accountability for the right thing getting done stays with the board. But perhaps they've delegated not accountability, but responsibility for doing the things that achieve the right things getting done. So in other words, you can delegate responsibility for actions, it's true, but in the end of the day, you don't get to delegate accountability for what gets done. If you hire my company to do something for your company, and my company fails to deliver, if I'm the president, if I'm on the board of directors, you're going to hold me accountable, and you don't want to hear, but it was one of the people I hired. They didn't get the job done like I expected they would. I outsourced everything that I sold you to someone else, and they didn't get the job done. You should be mad at them. You would say, no, I hired you. And you would hold me accountable as senior management of the organization because my organization failed your organization, and you don't care who actually dropped the ball that I hired. You're going to want to hold me accountable as leader of the organization. That's something you need to keep in mind. So if there's a problem with IT, external stakeholders still hold senior management accountable, even if it was someone in IT's fault. At least by the way that senior management views it. IT may have some attrition to their ranks. They may have people that are made redundant or fired. But in the end of the day, the external stakeholder doesn't even know about that, nor do they care. It's all about holding senior management accountable for the organization's success. So, what about security roles and responsibilities? That same idea of accountability and ownership goes into the organization itself. So within the organization, who is ultimately accountable for making sure that IT supports everybody's IT needs? Well, again, you might look at the head of the IT department and say, in the end of the day, I don't care who you hired or what you did, just make sure that my systems in my department work properly and that they're secure. So that means, again, the equipment and processes within IT's control and accountability are theirs. They are considered the risk owners of that business process. But it turns out the information and electronic version of the information that we call data that's in the IT systems, who is ultimately accountable for that information? Well, that might have come from one of the other departments themselves. They collected it, they use it, they exchange it, they disseminate it, they distribute it. And it's really up to them to decide who sees it, where it goes, and how it's used. Not IT. That department tells IT how to configure systems, or that the system should be configured to protect the data they are accountable for, that they own, regardless of the fact that the IT department actually manages the equipment that processes the data. So this is, again, understanding information ownership. Data ownership may not actually be the same as the IT systems that manage the data and process the data. You see? So in some respects, the IT department can be owners and accountable for machinery, perhaps, but even then, it could be the user department has specifically acquired and deployed that system for their own needs, in which case they would still even be the systems owner, leaving IT to basically be, well, staff, essentially. Not making decisions on how data is used, but implementing IT to support the data owner's idea of how it should be used. It's all about decision-making authority that goes to the person or people or department that's accountable for that data. So we need to be careful to understand the data owner provides the formal authorization for user access, for example. And it could be that the people that manage the systems are not really data owners per se. They didn't get to make decisions about it, but they do take care of the day-to-day maintenance and administration of data security on behalf of information owners. You want an example of that, maybe? How about this? How about my business process is to profitably sell and deliver training to the satisfaction of my customers, and it's online, on-demand training. That's my business purpose, my business mission. And I instruct IT, hey, I need to have a web presence. So I'm going to need you guys to help, and ladies, to help build a server that will provide information via a web interface. I need to ensure that we can, set up and administer some programs, some study programs, courses for people to purchase and utilize. And along the course of the way, we need to make sure that we have IT set up to where it can take their order, process their order, get payment for the order, and perhaps even set up a user account for the order. Okay, well, in the end of the day, it turns out there's also a lot of compliance requirements when you're in a commercial environment like that, for privacy, for example. Well, it turns out external regulators, they don't dig into the organization to find that IT misconfigured something that didn't protect data privacy according to regulatory requirements. They still hold senior management accountable to make sure that IT knew to do that. So, again, collecting information from the public was senior management's idea, wasn't it? They maybe didn't roll up their sleeves and do it, but it was their idea to get it done. They collected the information that was part of the business operations, and therefore they are accountable as a business to protect that information according to compliance requirements. It is now up to senior management to ensure that whoever they use to actually process that information, they need to inform those IT people of the compliance requirements. They need to instruct IT to build the systems to comply with those requirements. And then they're also even responsible for checking up to make sure that IT really accomplished their goal to comply properly. Because if they didn't, it's still senior management that could be held accountable for compliance breach. So hopefully this will help you understand the difference between risk ownership, which goes to the data ownership, and custodianship, people that actually just don't make decisions on the protections and the requirements, but they may implement them on behalf of the owners that do. That's a critical concept to understand for your exam.